Hi, this is Andrew with Parallax Point. This is another impromptu video, as my videos usually are. And I think I want to talk about tests, how the universe tests us, and what that's kind of been like for me. I might shift gears into another topic, but we'll see how this goes. So, when we are shifting into another version of ourselves or reality, it feels to me like the universe does test us, usually in a form that will trigger one of our core fears or a core aspect of ourselves that we have to drop in order to shift into this new version of reality. It's the way that reality brings us into higher alignment with our intention. Because when you're manifesting from this kind of place, your intentions are being used to draw you into a more evolved state. It's not exactly like just manifesting something on a whim. It's more manifesting your heart's desires. And I think it takes following your heart's desires to give you the fuel and fire in order to overcome the challenges that inevitably come from this kind of journey. Some people might be able to just kind of drop that altogether and just shift realities. And if they're able to do that, then they do also shift into the new version of themselves that matches that reality, because that's how it works. You change yourself in order to change your reality. And that's not just from a separation viewpoint of your actions and behaviors are different. It's that reality does mirror you, and so when you change, reality actually changes. So the whole point of there being tests is that these are opportunities that push you to make the changes you need to make in order to fully manifest this new version of reality, which means manifesting a new version of yourself. It can be discouraging also, and I totally get that. And I think it can be the reason some people drop out of trying to manifest something, why they give up and they start thinking, oh, this doesn't work, or oh, this is a waste of time. And something could be said for, if you give up, then maybe it wasn't really your authentic desire, or it wasn't strong enough. If it wasn't strong enough, then that means it wasn't your heart's deepest desire. There's this movie Whiplash that comes to mind, and this isn't like the best example, but it's an example that I think really stands out of how the music instructor pushes his student, the drummer, as far as he can possibly push him, and it definitely becomes abusive in some ways. But there's a line in that movie where the teacher says, and I'm paraphrasing here, if he doesn't reach this state of greatness, then he wasn't worthy of it. It was something like that. And something like that maybe rings true here, where maybe the ultimate litmus test for if your desires are authentic or not is if you're willing to persist past any challenge, past any test, even when your soul feels like it's almost defeated and you feel like you're about ready to give up. And like you're not sure how you're going to keep going, but somehow something inside you is just like, we're still going. We're not giving up this fire. And even in the darkest moments when you feel like that fire is dimmed so much and you feel like it's all hopeless and maybe you're just delusional, or maybe you're stupid, or maybe you're crazy, or maybe you're selfish, and you think like, maybe the thing to do is just give up. And there are conversations in the spiritual world around what it means to surrender, what it means to let go, and the importance of that, and conversations around radical acceptance and being selfless, not selfish. And those conversations can be used as rationale to give up. And you start to think to yourself, well, maybe giving up here is the best thing. It's the most spiritual thing to do. It's the most unconditional thing to do. Maybe it is. Because you start feeling like all this pressure you're putting on yourself to achieve this dream that starts to almost feel painful to even move towards, because of how hurt you've been from all of your defeats. Because you're battered and bruised and bleeding out, you start to think like, maybe this really isn't worth it. Maybe I need to give it up and I need to surrender. And that's the most spiritual thing to do. Maybe it is. But what if this fire within you, this thing within yourself that keeps pushing you to keep going, what if that's the thing that's been inviting you to grow and evolve and become a better person? Because there's no way you would have been able to face these tests as often as you have, to the degree that you have, and kept going without this fire. And that changing it up or diluting it just isn't enough. You know, it'll take you to a certain length, a certain distance, but you know on some level that it's not going to take you as far as you want to go. And that if you give up, it's not just giving up on the dream, it's giving up on a whole version of yourself. And you feel on some level that you'll still grow and change, but without that kind of firepower, it's not going to lead you to the same place. It's not going to have the same direction. And you're afraid that something's going to fall flat. Because you've looked at your life and you've seen how it's always the case. How even things you get worked up and excited about that seem in alignment with your authentic desires, usually end up giving out, and you give up. Because when you reflect on it, none of those things really have that same level of firepower. Not to the same degree. Not to the degree where you would be willing to push till there's nothing left in you. not to the degree where you're willing to push till the end of your days, till you're dead. It's a dark way to put it, but I'm just saying, it just feels like a firepower that can just keep going no matter what kind of challenge comes up. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't regroup and get some rest and then jump back into action after that. But it's more of it's like you just know that it's going to take you there if you can follow it, if you can trust it. And at times it feels like your whole world is reflecting to you that you should stop, or it's a waste of time, or you feel like people that you try to talk to about it and you realize at this point that it's not really worth it to talk to people about it as a whole, except maybe a few people at the right moment. You just start to realize like people don't understand. They don't seem to be able to understand it. And honestly, who can understand it unless someone who's experiencing the same thing or has experienced it? So in some sense, you kind of start to feel alone in it. And you start to feel crazy. But it's still there. That firepower is still there. And even when the pain is there, even when you feel bloodied and bruised and worn out, even when you question yourself, even when you're looking at all the mistakes that you've made along this path, the many mistakes you've made along this path, the ways that you've made a mess of things, the ways that you've sabotaged, even after all of that, even with what feels like the last ounce of life force left in you, there's still something there that won't stop, that says, don't give up. Something that you feel like you can believe in, even though everything feels impossible. Not everything, but it feels like the road is just so high as to be nearly impossible. And you start to think that maybe it's just a fantasy, that's just a fool's errand. And there's a part of you that just wants to just say, let's just stop, let's just rest, let's just take it easy. But what it's really saying is, let's just give this up. Let's just give it up. Let's just let it go. Let's just return back to our old life. Let's set our sights on our prior intentions again. And you know you can do it in theory. And you know that there's something in you that just can't stand the idea of it. There's a part of you that's wrestling with that and refusing it. But even that part, it even feels almost different from this fire that just wants to keep going, because it's not the part that wants to wrestle, it's just the part that keeps burning. It's the source of light, it's the source of warmth, and there's something in it that just trusts, knows, that's sure. Sometimes it feels like a blaze, and sometimes it feels like just a small fire deep within you with darkness all around it, but it's still there. And you're almost scared to keep following it. But something about it feels real. Something about it just feels like it knows. And it just wants you to trust it. It just wants you to trust. It doesn't want you to give up. Because giving up is not the same as surrender. Surrender is trust. It's not force, it's not control, but it is trust. It's not giving up. It's not some kind of forced acceptance where you feel guilty that you're not appreciating what is in the moment. It's not that. True acceptance, I don't think, is something that you have to force yourself into. I think true acceptance is more like a flow, like you just appreciate what is, but it's not like a stagnant thing. It's I think it's more dynamic. Because true acceptance is also all-encompassing. True acceptance is also accepting that fire that wants to keep going. And if it's meant to not keep going, then it will stop going at a certain point. But to make it artificially give up is maybe not the right way. It has to reach its point, that point on its own, if it reaches it. It's almost like that's a form of control. To put out the fire according to what you think should happen. To put out the fire because according to your mind, your intellect, or what other people say, it needs to be put out. To me, that sounds more egoic than trusting the fire and letting it do its thing. But the fire is not the same as the part that wrestles and wants to control. And it does seem at times that those two parts can be conflated with each other. To listen to the fire and trust it doesn't mean that we have to have a hard grip, or that we have to manage everything, or that we have to push ourselves beyond what feels right. Not staying in our comfort zone, but only pushing ourselves. I don't know how to say that. It's more just following what seems right. which just means just trusting this fire. And the fire can lead to action, but that's not really its true power. It's part of it, but its power is more in giving light, certainty, truth, aliveness, warmth. There's something about that we just have to listen to and let it keep doing its thing. It's almost like the part that wants to wrestle things is in some ways in conflict with the fire, although it thinks it's helping it. Because the wrestling thing is just fear. The wrestling thing is afraid of what will happen if it doesn't reach its dream. And so it gets desperate. It gets desperate and impassioned. It feeds in some ways off the fire, but it doesn't dwell in the fire. And so we're right to not want to let that part be in charge, even in a way to dissolve or transmute the part. I don't know, but to not want to let it be in charge, that is, I think, a valuable intention. But we have to realize that that part is very distinct from the fire. They're not the same thing. And dethroning the wrestling part doesn't mean we have to put the fire out. So how do we dethrone it? It would seem like love would do it. Or it would seem like if we can focus on the fire and dwell within that, that it will take care of the rest. If we stop feeding the fear, if we stop feeding the wrestler and stop giving it attention, I'm just talking out loud here. The wrestler wants to control because it's afraid of losing. And it's afraid of losing because if it does, it's afraid of losing aliveness. The wrestler is afraid of losing aliveness. But the fire itself is aliveness. It's aliveness leading towards more aliveness. That's what makes it fire. It's aliveness leading towards more aliveness. The wrestler feels a lack of aliveness, and he wants to grab onto it, consume it. The aliveness is not something you can grab onto and hold. It's something that you resonate with. It's not seeing it as something that's purely outside of you. It's more like being tuned in to something seemingly outside of you that activates the aliveness within you. Like a tuning fork. And then you start to resonate with it. And you're drawn into it. And it feels natural. But then the wrestler comes in. And he feels amazed by this aliveness. And he wants it, he wants more of it. And he becomes instantly afraid of losing it. Now that he's tasted it, he doesn't want to let it go for a second. He becomes an addict. And so he does things that throw that which is within out of alignment, out of resonance with that which activated it. In other words, the wrestler fucks things up, gets in the way, because he wants to grab onto that aliveness and hold it and keep it forever. But he doesn't realize that that's not how it works. Because as soon as you try to grab onto it and keep it out of fear that you don't already have it, it's like you create that reality. That becomes your experience. The fear that you don't already have it is at the source of the wrestler. And when the wrestler takes charge, when the focus turns towards him, when the attention turns towards him, he blocks the aliveness, he blocks the flame. The wrestler doesn't seem to have aliveness within himself. It's like he's just something hollow. Desperate but hollow. And yet he has so much energy when he's desperate. But what he's really doing is he's taking the energy of the fire and he's redirecting it. Maybe it's like he's sucking it up. Maybe he's sucking it up. Maybe the wrestler is also a vampire. And he's sucking up the aliveness that's within us, that was activated. And he's sucking it up to get to the aliveness that he perceives as out there. So that he can suck that up too. But he's just sucking things up. And he's not saying that if he just gets out of the way, the aliveness that's already there is going to attract the aliveness that seems to be out there, because they're in resonance with each other, because they pull each other towards each other. He doesn't get that. He feels like he's going to be left out. And once he's tasted the aliveness, there's no way he can let himself be left out anymore. He's tasted it. He knows what it's like to have it, even just for a moment. And now nothing else compares. But there's another part, a tired part, that just wants to be comfortable all over again, that just wants to go back to the old ways, that just wants to let it all go, all this pressure, this whole journey, and just relax and just go back to the old ways and just be comfortable. Maybe go to sleep a little. Yeah. The sleeper just wants to go back to sleep. It wants to forget this aliveness. And it wants to replace it with other things. It wants to replace the aliveness with comfort. Aliveness feels too dangerous to it. It feels too risky. Comfort feels more secure, feels more sustainable. And it just wants to have that again. Comfort. But what it really wants to do is it wants to go back to sleep and forget that this whole journey ever happened, or if it remembers it, to remember it only as a dream. It's nothing real, because that would be too painful, because then it would have to face the aliveness again. And if the aliveness is still there, which it most likely is, then it puts it into cognitive dissonance or spiritual dissonance. And that makes it uncomfortable, because then it has to decide between two things: comfort or a challenging path, an alive path, but a challenging path. So comfort or discomfort. Maybe it's hoping that the vampire will win and suck up all the life force, all the aliveness, so that the sleeper can then take over and become dominant. But the vampire doesn't ever stop. The vampire just keeps looking to consume more and more aliveness, more perceived aliveness. And it ends up keeping its focus out there on finding more. And if it misses the mark, which it will do most likely, if it misses its target, its real target, which is whatever activated the aliveness in the first place, then eventually, one day, it's going to look for substitutes. It's going to look for the best thing, the next best thing it can find that can simulate this aliveness. Like drugs, or sex, or risk-taking, or something that is a replacement for the dream, the activator. And really, the vampire is in cahoots with the sleeper. It just doesn't know it. Because it's actually pushing itself further and further away from the real, true aliveness. It doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't know that it's destroying it. Maybe not completely, but it just keeps pushing the aliveness away, the true aliveness. And so now what? You listen to the vampire. You listen to the sleeper. Or you listen to the wrestler. Or you listen to the aliveness. And the aliveness knows what to do. The others don't. The others have no true idea of how to get to the dream. They have distorted views. Whatever they do is likely to drive the dream further away. It's only the aliveness that really knows what to do. Because once attention is placed back on it, it resonates with its activator. And when it's in resonance, then it's naturally drawn to it, pulled to it, like two magnets coming together. not through any kind of force, not through any kind of manipulation or control, through trust and through letting reality do its thing. But even that's overthinking it a little bit. The journey is part of the aliveness. A journey of disidentifying from fear, disidentifying from the wrestler and the vampire and the sleeper, detaching from all of them, rising above all of them, and entering and staying within the fire. That's where the aliveness is. That's where trust is. That's what leads to a greater and greater sense of aliveness. Because like attracts like. And to those who have some, more will be given. That's the aliveness. You just have to trust. Yeah. I think that's all I feel called to share today. All right, thank you.